So today I'm answering one of your frequently asked questions. What iconic watch would I recommend as your first luxury timepiece under $5,000? Well, today I'm going to go with 9 of my favorite brands that I highly recommend and a few honorable mentions along the way. And don't forget to add your nominations and suggestions in the comments below. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. I'll get the wristwatch check out of the way, wearing the Tudor Submariner. There it is on the nylon black and grey in a kind of Bondian fashion. That's from Wrist Candy Watch Club. I actually took off my Panerai for a few days. Can you believe it? Anyway, right, let's start off with the first brand. Oh, and this doesn't go in any particular order. And I should also point out, guys, I'm going to be a little bit déclassé and focus a lot on value, but guys, if you're looking for an investment, this is the wrong channel. I do not talk about watches as an investment. Yes, value retention and all of that stuff is important. As soon as you start talking about value and all of that before anything else, that well, you're not a watch enthusiast anymore. You become disqualified. You're a money enthusiast. Anyway, I've had that rant many times, so let's get on with it.
Tudor remains, as Rolex founder Hans Wilsdorf originally intended it to be, the little sister brand for those with more taste, class and sense than to go with what Rolex offers. In my opinion, there are essentially 2 Tudor brands: the vintage Tudor of the pre-2009 relaunch and the modern watch enthusiast / hipster, now mainly in-house Tudor. But both offer perhaps the best value when it comes to buying instantly recognizable design icons. Vintage Tudor offers a much more faithful to Rolex aesthetic, with affordable to maintain ETA-based alternatives and exceptional brand involvement in being military issued, historic exploration, and of course a motor racing legacy. The Prince dates days, and even earlier Oyster Prince watches can all be found on the used market for several thousand. And while Tudor's version of the Daytona, the Big Block, is creeping ever closer to the $10,000 mark, as is their classic Submariners like my own, some of their less desired dial variations and sizes, however, can still be found for well under $5,000. Take the largely forgotten Hydronaut, for example, the older Pelagos models with too much text on the dial, or the really cool Tudor Chrono Time Tigers. They're certainly not making any of these ever again.
Of course, the modern Black Bay, with its never-ending list and plethora of variations to choose from, is probably top of the list, but there's so much more to Tudor than snowflake hands and the YouTube Black Bay hype, shall we say.
Rolex.
Omega.
Beautiful.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I've recently discussed why Omega is perhaps the best value Swiss luxury brand of all time in a dedicated video, so I'm going to be brief here and have a look back in case you missed it. The contemporary new iterations of their heavyweight icons like the Moon and Bond watches now offer superior cost levels in testing, quality and accuracy with METAS, but are mainly between the 5 and 10k range at retail. However, going used, it remains the brand with the widest range of styles and genres available. From overlooked gems like the $500 Omega DeVille tank style ultra-thin unisex quartz dress watch I recently purchased for my wife, or the 1950s pre-trilogy in-house automatic Seamaster from the literal golden age of Omega that I snagged for myself for well under 2k. There's everything from the pre-World War II period, 90s Brosnan era Bond watches, speedies, both automatic, manual wind, and everything in between. Omega remains, in my opinion, the best value heritage Swiss-made luxury brand to buy right now.
pop culture fame, its cinematic fame, horological, historic achievements, innovation, complications they offer, styles of their icons. Very few brands offer as much, in my opinion, than Omega.
Breitling is an interesting brand to consider, as it's undoubtedly had some big changes in the last decade under new management, with a shift away from the oversized and loud to a purer, more traditional, dedicated luxury, sports and pilot watch brand. While going new is certainly outside of today's price range, like the previously discussed Omega, this new Breitling leaves a treasure trove of overlooked gems to find on the used market before the recent rejuvenation of the brand. Recently I acquired the new Navitimer book, which I highly recommend by the way, released in tandem with the modern updated models that I also reviewed, to celebrate and document this massively iconic watch. Inside is a whole section which perfectly demonstrates the sweet spot to search for. The Navitimer, aside from its later pop culture fame, was revolutionary for the time in the early 1950s. Breitling added a circular slide rule bezel to the previous chronomat, and in doing so made it a dedicated tool for pilots to make all kinds of aviation-related calculations. And voila, an icon was born in 1954. But not only can you find more traditional interpretations of this classic, but historic spin-offs like my modded for space Cosmonaut model that I currently own, or the equally legendary 80s and 90s Ani-Digi aerospace watches that were intended to replace the mechanical predecessors with more modern tech of the time.
Ain't it cool?
So we focused rather a lot so far on vintage options and on the used market. Let's look at some watches you can buy brand spanking new that are instantly recognizable to watch enthusiasts as being iconic, and nobody does it quite like the Germans.
When it comes to Bauhaus minimalism, there's no doubt the name at the top of everyone's list will be the timelessly elegant Max Bill collection from Junghans. Designed in the early 1960s by Swiss polymath Max Bill, using his strict mathematical design theory he pioneered and would later teach, its inimitable, understated dressy style has been endlessly mimicked by the fashion watch brands in particular, and even other German higher-end watchmakers. At a quick glance to the untrained eye of a cultural Philistine, it may look similar, but true connoisseurs and design experts can always tell the difference.
Today you can buy a faithfully reissued Max Bill in over 50 variations, and well under the 2K mark, especially if you go quartz, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's about the design here more than what's inside. Pure class all the way, especially that anthracite dial one. Whew, gorgeous.
The second part of my two German watch choices is Hanhart. I could have gone with the more obvious Lacquer or Stover brands if you wanted manufacturers of the original World War II highly influential Fliegers.
I'm going to interrupt here. Bonus mention, if you want a World War II looking Flieger from a more prestigious brand than Lacquer and what was the other one, Stover, check out IWC. They're older models of the Flieger watches, and you can find them ETA based under $5,000 on the used market, so definitely worth checking out. I've come this close a few times to buying one, but not quite yet.
This captured film shows how quickly the 109s and the Focke-Wulf 190s got into action. They were as grimly determined to stop these great daylight thrusts into their industrial heart as our bombers and fighters were resolved to press them home to the hilt.
But Hanhart, in my opinion, is a little bit more special and important. So let me explain why. Unlike the previous mentioned two brands, who are part of the 5 historic watchmakers tasked with officially producing the World War II pilot watches during wartime, Hanhart was given the more prestigious job of producing more complex military chronographs for Germany's elite pilots and senior officers. This is a very important distinction, And the reason why they were chosen was because they had already made world history by introducing the caliber 40 mono-pusher chrono in the pre-war late 1930s. This would evolve into the two-pusher caliber 41 chrono, and finally the iconic 417 ES, which used to be one of my Grail watches until that dream finally came true, and that was made famous after the war by Steve McQueen. The 417 would go on to inspire the later Type 10 military chronographs during the 1950s, but due to war reparations, brands like Blancpain and many others would get all the credit, as Hanhart had to produce them under a different name. Hanhart remains a true independent watchmaker, producing modern updated 417s to this very day, but aficionados know it remains the original maker of the most influential military chronograph of all time. At well under 3,000 brand new, in multiple sizes and even a flyback version, Hanhart is the choice for those truly in the know and who want something iconic but not a painfully cliched one. And with the quality in terms of production that Germans are renowned all over the world for, Hanhart had to be in my list.
So I can imagine a lot of my audience screaming at me now, what about Zinn? What about Zinn? Well, Zinn are fantastic. I've owned many, as you guys know, and they certainly have a whole bunch of heavyweight icons.
While Zinn have unquestionably achieved so much in a relatively short amount of time, Hanhart remains the underrated heritage underdog in this domain. An honourable mention would be the Zinn 903, their own officially licensed version of the Navitimer we discussed before. This occurred when Breitling had a financial wobbly in the 1970s and sold them the rights to legally produce it themselves. But now let's return to some options you can buy today, absolutely brand new. Next, it's back to the Swiss with Frederique Constant, a brand that deeply impressed me when I reviewed their in-house fully mechanical High Life perpetual calendar last year. What was so insanely impressive was the price tag at under $10,000, which for one of the highest and most complicated of haute horology complications is worthy of any watch enthusiast's respect. They also produced the most affordable Swiss-made tourbillon in-house as well, at a mind-boggling price of only $15,000. So this begs the question, what high-end complication can we get for under $5,000? Well, FC seems to have no end of its dominance in proprietary developed calibers that undercut almost every Swiss rival.
FC do a really bang-up job of offering that classic world-timer Patek look, but with its own distinct style and technology, an amazing price, classic Swiss-made quality and look and aesthetic in a very clean, tastefully done manner. Recently they gave the world-timer, I mean it's been out, what, 10 years now? A makeover, an update, by including it in the High Life range, which is just fantastic because you get a more modern, sporty, more Gentry-esque look. It's still an iconic look, I think, but without being a blatant homage, which I think is really, really important.
As far back as 2012, they introduced their FC 718 World Timer caliber, capable of automatically synchronizing and tracking the time in 24 cities displayed on the dial. If you have missed my several previous videos discussing this type of watch, it's a complication that Patek Philippe pioneered in collaboration with the inventor of this complication, Swiss watchmaker Louis Cartier. Together, they introduced the reference 1415 in 1939, and since then it has inspired, along with being imitated, by almost every brand with lofty ambitions to become something like Patek. However, the look of 24 cities, inner rotating discs, and often a globe or world map has become synonymous with Patek. If the Rolex day date is emblematic of captain of industry types, then the World Timer, with its signature cloisonné dial, has become the choice of the private jet-set bosses that give them their orders. In other words, it's a kind of haute horology status symbol, and you can begin to see why so many brands want to have their own take on it. And for this year, in 2023, it saw another update with the very tastefully done caramel brown dial variation. But what puts FC at the top of the list when it comes to world timers in particular, beyond all the other options out there, aside from the outstanding quality, classic looks, and obviously the highly competitive value, is that it also packs one hell of a horological punch. FC, in being able to develop this caliber themselves, has refined it technically beyond what Patek has done by adding a unique mechanism, meaning adjustment can be made solely via the crown and not another pusher or a recessed hidden pusher. Very nifty indeed.
So by the end of this year, 2023, Frederique Constant is a brand I will be adding to my own personal collection. That's how excited I am by what they're doing. I'm not going to give spoilers away of which particular watch, stay tuned, but I will try and review the World Timer because I think they're just fantastic. I have considered the classic many times. I've come so close to buying it, pulling the trigger so many times. But I think this year I will definitely take the plunge. Even their tourbillon is tempting. I mean, that price, a Swiss-made tourbillon at 15 grand. I don't understand. Hopefully everyone's talking about it, right? I hope so. At least they should be, right? Maybe a new grail, I don't know. Anyway, stay tuned. Whatever the result, it's going to be very expensive for me.
Henrietta Gladstone, how are your teeth? Not bad. Right. I can't stand fuss and nonsense. Can you? Good. Right. I want to make things very clear. Horses, dogs, people. In that order. The house, ghastly, but it'll do for Mother and the hounds. We shall live in Scotland. You're quite sweet. Now, how's your jaw?
Is what?
Can you take a punch?
Well,
For me, Cartier is a brand that immediately conjures up images of impoverished aristocrats in poorly maintained stately homes, new money Gordon Gekko types who wear them in order to buy into the class associated with the brand, and more recently bejeweled, oversized versions beloved by many drill artists. For too long, the watch snobs, who ineffectively try to gatekeep this hobby of ours, have dismissed Cartier as merely a jewellery maker for royals, old money, and iconic pre-social media celebrities. But in the recent decade, as seen on this channel for several years consecutively, they have topped the annual lists in the best of watchmaking innovation. Cartier is a brand undoubtedly on the rise, but the best thing is, most of their iconic pieces can be picked up for well under $5,000. Take my Gekko-era Santos Galbi Moonface. I picked it up a year or two ago for an absolute steal. And while sure it is quartz, without a seconds hand that ticks, I always forget it's not mechanical and it just looks the kipper's knickers. Or how about the classic Tank XL, like the one I gifted my wife, and again, it's quartz. It's just so convenient, along with its grab-and-go ease, almost perfect accuracy, so what if it's quartz?
The Cartier Santos is not just an iconic watch, it's the first iconic watch, and that's really significant. I mean, it debuted in 1911, that's over 100 years ago. How many watches can boast that? And also, not many watches have stayed, well, I know it has a ton of variations, but if you look at a standard Santos today, not the XL or skeletonized or any of that stuff, but just the standard one, and compare it to the very first one, you can see the resemblance. I'm going to sneak in a bonus mention, honorable suggestion here from Gerard Perregaux. If you want that Cartier Roadster look or that Frank Mueller tonneau shaped look, check out the Richville. It was a big flop for Gerard Perregaux in the 90s, but I think they're gorgeous and you can find them well under $5,000. Very iconic looking, but of course it's Gerard Perregaux, which as you guys know, a very horology brand now. But yeah, very cool and highly underrated.
look, I hate to break up the bromance. 20 seconds late.
Now, I've talked about Panerai recently a lot, after falling head over heels for them, so I will be brief here. I purchased an older late 90s 40mm Panerai Luminor PAM 048 at the start of 2023, and so far it's still the most worn watch of the year. The honeymoon phase shows no sign of slowing down, and I even took it with me to wear during my recent adventure in Italy and the brand's birthplace in Florence. Love or loathe Panerai, they are a defiant Marmite brand. Nobody can deny, however, how distinctly unique, instantly recognizable, and without a shadow of a doubt, how they can be characterized with the most overused word of the video today: undeniably iconic. With many controversies over the years, not to mention those who it was originally made for, the oversized watch trend dying quicker than the villains in the Expendable movies, the used market flooded with difficult to spot fake Panerais, and it being an acquired taste in general, this all translates to many bargains that can be found on the used market.
I'll be back. You've been back enough. I'll be back.
Yippee-ki-yay.
Like 75% of the luxury watches I bought in the last few years, it was off the used Japanese market. They just offer really great deals and they're very meticulous. Mine ended up costing about $3.5 grand. Not bad at all for something so fun and versatile.
Last we have Grand Seiko. Unlike the mid to entry level Seiko range that has seen an upward price adjustment at retail, much to the dismay of most of us raised on SKXs and Flightmasters for dirt cheap, GS has stayed, with the majority of their watches, more or less steady in price. And while the Swiss also have upped their prices almost entirely across the board, this has made Grand Seiko, especially post-pandemic, a more and more competitive alternative to the only partly 60% Swiss-made luxury options around the 5K range, with techniques in hand finishing and decoration comparable to what you typically see at the Holy Trinity level of brands, a strict design language rooted in traditional Japanese art and culture, especially with their mesmerizing nature-inspired dial work, and then also powered by calibers entirely developed, designed, manufactured, assembled and adjusted all in-house. Seiko is one of only 2 watch companies considered to be completely vertically integrated, the other being Rolex, of course.
Now there are tons of examples, especially if you go used, some of the earlier quartz Grand Seikos, but I'm going to pick one you can buy new just to demonstrate why they define pure class in my opinion.
The SBGW283 has a beguiling dial in a delicate shade of pale azzurro blue, inspired by the color of the skies as summer begins, a season known as Kishun. At 37mm and only 11mm thick, its modest yet modern scale houses a decorated manual wind 9S64 caliber. Seiko describe it as, and I quote, the beauty of simplicity, end quote. And with those signature razor-sharp blade-like hands, the uninterrupted symmetrical dateless layout with multifaceted applied markers, it's perfectly emblematic of the iconic Grand Seiko style. Much like Z Germans, with their 3 words, made in Germany, made in Japan, also really does mean something here. And arguably, for both of these countries, it has something of a little more authenticity to it, compared to the largely compromised made in Switzerland.
So I'm going to leave it there. Now, of course, I could nominate 100 iconic watches in this price range. I just wanted to pick my favorites. Do share yours in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, very important indeed, especially if you want to see more free and independent content like this. Right, I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Onwards and upwards.